In the 6th century before Christ, there was a prophet in the land of Israel who looked around about the world and didn't like what he saw. There was violence flaring in so many places on the far horizons. There was a threat of invasion. There was a lack of justice being practiced in his own land, and he was so confused and upset that he turned to God for some word. This man's name was Habakkuk. And finally he withdrew from his brethren for a little while and went directly to God to speak his word, to confront him, as he said. When he came back to speak to his people, he had this one great word: the just shall live by faith. And of course that word, which probably should have been translated in our English Bible, faithfulness, became the great word that Paul took unto himself. And after Paul, Martin Luther, so that our Protestant heritage really goes back to this word of an ancient prophet. We are saved by faith. I was thinking about that some time ago when I read a word of a resistance fighter in France in 1941. He was facing the invasion of his land. The tyranny had come in and looked hopeless for a long time ahead. What should he do? Come to terms with the tyrant? That's what a good many were doing. Or join the underground movement and risk his life? And in that moment he wrote down these words: this is not a time for me to desert my faith. It is not a time to turn for new images for my belief. This is the time for me to be dangerously faithful. It was the same word Habakkuk had spoken all those centuries ago. It's a word for us today. I want to talk about it today in this conference Sunday. Dangerously faithful. That was his word. Now, the first thing I'd like to do is to share with you one of my problems. I know you don't have enough of your own. Take mine along with it, will you? I wonder if a number of you share this with me. The problem of deciding where maturity ends and compromise begins. How do you know whether you're growing up and getting wiser, or whether you're leaving behind the thing which you should keep no matter what it costs? It's almost seemed to me that was one of my main problems. You can't help growing up. And you cannot help thinking differently today than you thought 10 years ago or 20 or 30. This is the price we pay for growing up. St. Paul put it perfectly: when I was a child, I thought of it as a child and so on, but now that I am a man, I have put away childish things. We have to put away some things. We have to leave some of the childish things behind. For example, on a Christmas morning, every man's life is poor if there are not small children in the home on that day. I do not know anything that makes Christmas quite so wonderful as the shining brightness in the eyes of little children who have been told that during the night Santa Claus came and there was something in a stocking for them. I don't know what the child experts are saying today. Maybe you're not supposed to teach your children about Santa Claus. I never thought there was much harm in it. It always seems to me it adds something to the whole family's celebration of the birthday of Christ. But let me tell you something. If you have a boy in your home 18 years of age who still believes in Santa Claus, I'd get worried. Some things are all right in their proper place, but some things you outgrow if you are normal. I can remember as a small child in Sunday school going around the room singing a little song, "Hear the Pennies Dropping." I don't think that did any harm, and for one thing, a penny was worth something in those days. But when laymen who are making good income still drop pennies into the coffers of the church, that's a matter of real concern. They're still back there in kindergarten. And it's one of the things that makes the church limp when it ought to run. I meet people constantly who are quite competent in their own professions. Indeed, they have risen to the head of those professions sometimes. But so far as grasping the issues of our life, so far as knowing anything about the African continent and its awakening, so far as having any grown-up ideas about economics or politics, they're still back in the days when they were reading the Rover Boys. And I don't know that they've read anything since. That is a sad thing, to see grown men who mentally are still little children when it comes to living in the world in which we find ourselves today. That's a cause for real worry. On the other hand, sometimes in the name of getting mature, we put behind us those things which we must keep. I meet people today, too many of them, unfortunately many of them Methodists, whose story goes something like this: well, we were brought up on the idea of total abstinence, and we still believe that. But all our neighbors and all our friends serve cocktails, and so gradually we have accepted that. And I watch them as their life gets a little cheaper with each passing month and each passing year. I watch them as finally liquor becomes more and more a part of their life and a significant part of their life until they can hardly spend an evening cold sober. I watch them as they move out into these groups where at first it is the custom and the style to have a mild flirtation with another man's wife, nothing really serious. I watch them until finally the marriage vows become less important than they were. And then there comes that day when the home goes to pieces and they're not quite sure what happened except little by little. In the name of maturity, they left behind the strict puritanical principles of their homes. Now, I don't care what you call that business, my brethren, but in God's name, don't call it growing up.